The air was heavy that afternoon, one of those late summer days when the humidity sits on your shoulders like a wet blanket. I remember standing on the bank of the river, looking at the water sliding by in lazy green ripples. It didn't look dangerous. Wide, yes. Deep, maybe. But slow enough that it gave me a false sense of calm. The map showed a long detour following the ridge, while this crossing promised to save at least an hour of hiking before nightfall. That shortcut shimmered like a promise. I told myself, it's fine. It's just a crossing. Though deep down, I already knew that's how most bad stories begin. We'd been on the trail since sunrise, just me, my friend Caleb, and his old shepherd mix, Boone. Our packs were heavy with wet canvas and sweat-soaked shirts. The kind of weight that makes your mind start bargaining with reason. We'd spent half the day tracing a river bend that seemed to twist endlessly through the valley. Every corner looked the same. Dark alders leaning out over the water. Slick rocks. Mosquitoes so thick you could hear them hum like static. When the river widened into a shallow stretch with gravel shining beneath the surface, Caleb grinned and said, "Looks crossable to me." I should have said no. The current was deceptively smooth, like glass laid over muscle. We took a few minutes to scout a route, tossing pebbles, watching the flow tug them away. It didn't seem fast, and the water barely reached Boone's belly where it brushed the far shallows. Caleb shrugged his pack higher on his shoulders and stepped in, testing with his pole. I followed, boots sinking into the soft silt, cold water swirling around my calves. For a moment, it felt refreshing, even easy. Boone trotted ahead, tail high, paddling with happy splashes. I remember thinking we'd be on the other side in 5 minutes. Then the bottom dropped. I felt it first. The riverbed suddenly vanishing under my step, water lurching up to my waist, then my chest. My balance went out like a rug pulled from under me. Caleb turned, saw me flailing, and shouted, "Week of rain upstream." The last thing I saw before going under was Caleb lunging toward me, his face tight with fear. Then everything turned to bubbles and sound. When I came up the air, the world was a blur of motion, trees spinning, the hiss of water in my ears, sunlight flashing off the surface like shattered glass. I kicked hard, twisting until I broke free of the pack straps that had dragged me down. The current swept me sideways, not forward, and I felt the grit of rocks scraping my shins. Somewhere behind me, Boone was barking, sharp and panicked. I caught a glimpse of Caleb on the far bank, running downstream, matching my drift. His voice carried faintly through the roar, something about a branch, a snag, a place to grab. I couldn't make it out, but I knew what he meant. Hold on to something or be gone. I spun past a half-submerged log jutting out from the bank. I reached, missed, then hit it chest first on the next swing of the current. The breath shot out of me, but I clung on, arms wrapped around the slick wood, while the river shoved against my back. My legs kicked, trying to find purchase in the gravel below, but it was too deep. I just hung there, panting, the water roaring past my ears. The smell of wet bark and cold silt filled my lungs. I remember thinking, absurdly, how alive the forest smelled. Sharp and earthy, almost electric in the heat of my panic. Caleb was shouting again, somewhere upstream now. I couldn't turn my head without the current trying to peel me off the log, so I just yelled back, hoping he could hear. Boone's barking grew closer until I saw him paddling toward me, fur plastered flat, eyes wide and terrified. He tried to climb up the same log, and slipped back twice before managing to perch with his front paws beside me. I don't know who was trembling harder, me or that dog. Caleb found a long branch and waded out as far as he dared, boots braced against a boulder. The stick barely reached halfway, but he motioned for me to inch along the log toward him. Every move sent cold water rushing up to my chin, but little by little I worked out with each breath. I remember kneeling by Boone, scratching behind his ears and whispering, "Good boy, you crazy swimmer." He licked my chin, and for the first time since I'd stepped into the river, I felt my heartbeat start to slow. We gathered our things from where the current had scattered them. A boot downstream, Caleb's hat snagged on a branch, and my pack lodged against a rock a good 50 yards away. Everything was soaked. My sleeping bag, clothes, even the matches. When we finally dragged ourselves onto the far bank and collapsed under a birch tree, I felt heavier than I ever had before. Not from the weight of the pack, but from the realization that we'd come a few bad choices away from not making it out at all. We stayed there for a long time, sprawled in the grass beside that river, like two shipwreck survivors. The sun had dropped behind the ridge, and the light was turning that deep honey gold that makes everything look calm, even when your hands are still shaking. My boots squished with every small movement. I poured water out of one, and a small fish actually wriggled out onto the ground before flipping itself back toward the river. Caleb laughed so hard he wheezed, which helped take the edge off what had just happened. But underneath that laughter was silence. The kind that comes when both people are thinking the same thing but don't want to say it out loud. We took stock. The food bag was intact, though our bread had become a pulpy mess. Most of the gear had survived too, though my sleeping bag weighed about as much as Boone now. The stove fuel had floated away entirely, leaving us with just a few soggy matches and a damp box of tinder Caleb swore he could dry out. Boone sat between us, licking at his wet paws and occasionally looking toward the river with suspicion, as though expecting it to take another shot at us. I gave him half a granola bar for bravery and kept the other half for myself, chewing slow and quiet while the sound of running water filled the gaps in our conversation. Eventually, Caleb said, "We could have gone around the ridge. Would have taken an hour, maybe 2. "Yeah," I said, "but we'd have missed the part where I almost drowned. That's character building." He grinned, sleeping bag over a low branch, hoping the last rays of sunlight might pull some of the river out of it. Boone curled up on my jacket, already snoring. The fire took its time. First a flicker, then a hiss of smoke, then finally a small crackling flame that felt like victory itself. We sat close to it, steam rising from our sleeves, the warmth slowly seeping back into our bones. I remember staring into those flames and feeling my heartbeat settle into rhythm with the popping wood. That's when the fear started to dissolve into gratitude. Not the loud kind that comes with shouting or tears, but the quiet kind that sits deep in your chest. I was alive. We all were. Caleb handed me a tin mug of hot cocoa he'd somehow salvaged, thick and smoky from the fire. "2 shortcuts," he said, raising his mug. I smirked, and to learning the long ways, sometimes the better way. We clinked mugs, sipped, and watched the last light fade off the river. The surface looked peaceful again, a mirror of the sky, pretending innocence. I stared at it for a long time before turning away. That's when I decided that the next time a trail split in 2, I'd take the longer path, no matter how tempting the shortcut looked. Night came softly, but carried the kind of chill that creeps into your bones before you notice. The fire had burned down to a bed of red coals, pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark. Above us, the stars came alive, clear, sharp, and endless. You could almost hear the quiet, that deep forest stillness that only comes after something wild has passed. Boone shifted in his sleep beside me, letting out a soft whine, and I reached over to scratch behind his ears. He'd been through as much as either of us, and though dogs forget faster, I could tell the river had left its mark on him too. Caleb was sitting across the fire, legs stretched, boots drying near the heat. He looked thoughtful, the kind of look he got when he was turning something over in his head. "You ever think," he said slowly, "that we get too firelight?" We both froze, listening. It came again, a branch snapping, something moving slow through the underbrush. My heart thudded, all the earlier fear rushing back. Caleb reached for the hatchet beside him, but before he could stand, two bright eyes flashed just beyond the glow. Then came a snort and a thump of hooves. A deer stepped into the light, head lowered, steam puffing from its nostrils. It looked at us for a long moment, completely calm, before bounding off toward the river. Caleb exhaled. "Good to see something make it across without nearly dying," he said, grinning. The tension broke like a twig underfoot. We fed the fire a few more branches, and soon the warmth returned. I leaned back against my pack, staring at the flames. The adrenaline had worn off completely, replaced by that deep fatigue that comes after a scare. My mind drifted to other trips. Storms, broken gear, near misses, and how each one had taught me something. This one felt different, though. It wasn't just about caution. It was about respect. You can't fight a river. You can only move with it, learn its rhythm, and know when to let go. Before sleep took me, I heard the river again. Softer this time. Almost like it was whispering an apology. Or maybe a warning for next time. I closed my eyes and let the sound wash through me. Grateful for the fire's glow, for Boone's warmth against my side, for Caleb's quiet breathing across the flames. In that moment, danger felt distant, replaced by a deep peace that only comes after you've stared it down and walked away. Morning broke, gentle and grey, with a cool mist hanging low over the valley. The fire had dwindled to ash, and the world smelled of damp pine and river silt. My clothes were stiff from the night air, and every muscle ached in that dull, satisfying way that means you're still alive. Boone was already up, nose to the ground, tail sweeping through the dew. Caleb was crouched by the embers, coaxing a small flame from a bundle of dry grass he'd stored inside his shirt overnight, his fur catching the early light. Caleb adjusted his hat and nodded toward the ridge trail, the long way. "Let's take the scenic route," he said, and I didn't hesitate this time. We climbed the slope in steady silence, every step pulling us farther from the sound of rushing water. At the top of the ridge, the forest opened into a view that stopped us both cold. The river wound below like a silver ribbon, cutting through the green hills and shining in the rising sun. It looked peaceful from up there, so calm it was almost hard to believe how powerful it had been. I stood there for a long moment, breathing in the smell of wet earth and pine needles, letting the quiet sink in. Caleb handed me a strip of jerky and said, "Bet you won't forget this one." I shook my head. Not in this lifetime. We followed the ridge trail for hours, the sun climbing higher, our spirits lighter with each mile. The fear had faded, replaced by something else, a kind of respect. Not just for the wild, but for the way it humbles you, strips away the noise, and shows you what really matters. Out there, shortcuts don't mean much. Time moves slower, and every decision carries weight. That river taught me that patience isn't just wisdom, it's survival. By the time we reached the next camp, the world felt quiet again. Boone curled up beside the fire. Caleb hummed softly while boiling water, and I found myself staring into the flames, replaying that moment in the current, the panic, the cold, the clarity that followed. I thought about how close I'd come to being a story told by someone else, and how lucky I was that it was me telling it instead. So now, whenever I come to a river, I stop and listen. I test the water, watch the way it moves, and let it tell me its mood. Because out here, the land doesn't forgive arrogance, but it rewards respect. And sometimes the long road, the one that winds and climbs and takes its time, isn't just safer. It's where the real story waits to be found.